Recently, the NBA came out with their top 75 players of all time list. The only problem with it though, actually there's a lot of problems with it, but the major one is that nobody ranked these players. They had all this time and effort put into coming up with this list, but nobody to put them in order. So that's what I'm here to do today. Now the only rule for this video is that we're only using the 76 players the NBA included. I'm not making any changes to who they included, only ranking the ones that they do have. As for the methodology I'll be using, we're considering a few things: overall skill set, dominance and skill level within the era that they played, their ability to win games, and career achievement, along with just my opinion. But with that said, I will say two things. First is that I'm going to be skipping to number 60. Here's 76 through 61. I'm just trying to save time instead of going through 15 or so players who mostly played in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. But I do want to mention that all of these spots could have and maybe should have been used to go to guys like Klay Thompson, Dwight Howard, Kyrie Irving, Chris Bosh, Vince Carter, Manu Ginobili, Tracy McGrady, Tony Parker, and Pau Gasol. They could have easily ranked in these spots, or could have been a lot higher. The NBA is still just too caught up in making sure they rank all these players from the 50s in these top lists, when they probably shouldn't be. I'm sorry, but I'm not taking Bill Sharman over Vince Carter. I'm not taking Paul Arzon over Klay Thompson, or even how are they going to include Anthony Davis as a top 75 player all time over Dwight Howard's career. Some things don't make sense, but let's go with what we got. Starting with 60, which does go to Anthony Davis. In terms of career, he's an elite two-way player and an NBA champion, but his inclusion might be a little premature. 59, we have James Worthy, who was the third option on the Magic and Kareem Lakers. He thrived in that role though and was a huge part of their 3 championships. 58 goes to Wes Unsell. It's really tough comparing these older all-time greats to current players, but you have to take a lot of things into account. For Wes though, he made all of his teams better and dominated while doing so. 57 goes to George Mikan. Only had a 7-year career, but won 5 championships during it. 56 is Robert Parrish, third option to Larry Bird and Kevin McHale, but usually gets underrated for his skill on both ends. 55 belongs to Pete Maravich, who dominated in every way possible. Really was a missed opportunity though. Always played on bad teams and without a 3-point line. For 54, it's Rick Barry. NBA champion, shot free throws like a granny, and was way ahead of his time. 53 is taken by Alvin Hayes, two-way big man and dominated in the 70s. Number 52 goes to Carmelo Anthony. Listen, some may rank Melo higher, but when we're putting him up against players who won MVPs, championships, and more, in terms of a historic perspective, all Melo has is that he was a great scorer. For 51, it's Willis Reed, who helped bring the Knicks their only 2 championships. And now we're already into the top 50, and as we go on, I'll start to give more and more justification as to why certain players are ranking ahead and behind others. At 50 though, we have Bob Cousy, 6-time champion, league MVP, but I can only rank him so high and couldn't put him over more modern point guards. For 49, it's Walt Frazier, who led the Knicks to their 2 titles with Willis Reed. 48 though goes to Gary Payton, and Gary had a great career as one of the best defensive point guards ever, while also averaging 20 plus points a game for multiple seasons. Ahead of him at 47 is George Gervin, who won 4 scoring titles but was on bad teams and could never make his teams better. And okay, now's where things get interesting, coming in at 46, because it's Reggie Miller, who I ranked over George because he was mainly a scorer, but Reggie was one of the best shooters in the game, constantly came up big in the playoffs, and even had a finals run, none of which Gervin got the opportunity to do. Then at 45, slightly ahead of him is Ray Allen. Reggie and Ray are about as close in a ranking as you can get. The difference between the two is pretty small, but Reggie led his team and was never successful, while Ray was a slightly better shooter and instead a 3rd or 4th option, but helped his team win 2 titles, and plus he was a little better slasher too. For 44, it's Patrick Ewing, great 2-way player and even had a finals run. At 43, Dominique Wilkins never had that finals run or really anything close to it, but he had longevity, was a 30-point per game scorer in his prime, and the only thing lacking from his game was his ability to shoot. Number 42 goes to Clyde Drexler, and I'll admit it, kind of low for Clyde considering his actual talent and skill level, but he was always just a really good player that was lost in the middle of the pack in the league. Number 41 is then Damian Lillard. I wanted to rank him a few spots higher, but I couldn't yet. He has all the playoffs moments, the clutch factor, and every single thing that would make him a star, but he needs that one MVP season or that one championship if he wants to rank any higher inside the top 40. It's not his fault because he hasn't played with one single all-star since LaMarcus Aldridge, but until he does, I can't rank him too much higher. For 40, it's Russell Westbrook, and that's the reason Russ ranks slightly higher than Lillard. He has the career achievements and the historic records. I just still find it weird how Oscar Robertson's thought of as like a top 3-point guard for all of his triple doubles and stats, and Westbrook, he's just in the middle of the line. At 39, we give it to Allen Iverson. His game spoke for itself. 4-time scoring champ, 3-time steals leader, 1 MVP and finals appearance. Easy selection for the 39th spot. For 38, we gotta give it to James Harden. I do definitely think he's a top 50 player, and this is right about where he should wind up in terms of the top 50 based on where the other shooting guards all ended up. He's got the scoring and he had a lot of team success, so this was an easy choice. And again, ranks over a guy like Damian Lillard because of his MVP. Number 37 is Paul Pierce, who in terms of actual skill on the court, I wouldn't rank take over James and Dame, but due to his championship, finals MVP, and entire career, I had to give him the 37th spot. The 36th spot belongs to Kevin Mchale, who was a master offensively and defensively. He was Larry Bird's right-hand man who in his prime averaged 26 a game, while also making the all-defensive and all-NBA first team. Next up is 35, and that goes to Bill Walton. Had it not been for his injuries, he would have ranked much higher. He had a very short career, especially as a healthy player, but with 2 championships and an MVP, he made the most of it. With 34, it may be surprising, but this one's taken by Kawhi Leonard. I know some people are going to say this is a little high for him, but you can't argue with all these career accomplishments. Plus, he's like a Scottie Pippen that can average 27 a game. 33 is Jason Kidd, the ultimate leader, and he was like the Chris Paul before Chris Paul. Led multiple times in assists, was a star defensively, and made all of his teams better. What Chris Paul did to the Suns last year, Kidd did 15 years ago to the Nets. For 32, I had to give it to Steve Nash. Him and Jason are interchangeable without a doubt. Jason had the defense in the finals appearances, and Steve had the stats and MVPs. In my opinion though, I give Steve the slight edge. At 31, we take it way back to Bob Pettit, who was way ahead of his time and one of the Hawks' all-time best players. Now into the top 30 players of all time, and this spot goes to Jon Stockton. He's without a doubt an all-time great, but benefited a ton from playing alongside Malone his entire career. Without him though, his court vision, defense, and shooting was always legendary for his size. At 29, one small step ahead of him was Isaiah Thomas, who's nothing compared to John statistically, but his 2 championships speak volumes. He was able to lead the Bad Boys Pistons over Michael Jordan twice, something no one else was able to do. 28 is Charles Barkley. I didn't want to overrate him and I didn't want to underrate him, but I feel like for what he brought to the table, this was a good spot. Coming in at 27, we have Chris Paul. Chris is like Jason Kidd and Steve Nash in that he's a leader that makes all his teams better. He doesn't have the MVPs that Nash does, but he has a career's worth of success and never being on a bad team, as well as the defense and league leading steals that a guy like Jon Stockton had. For 26, we switch things up to a different John and John Havlicek, and the best way to describe him is a 60s version of Scottie Pippen. Won 8 titles with Bill Russell, was all defense 5 times, and averaged 29 points a game at one point. So then of course Scottie Pippen comes in at 25 and is carried here by his 6 titles with Michael Jordan. I rank him over Hondo though because he's the more modern version. His offense was more developed and he was overall a better defender. Plus he played a true second option in his 6 titles. 24 goes to Elgin Baylor, who actually won 0 NBA titles but ranks ahead of the previous 2 men due to how dominant he was in his time period. At 23 we have Julius Irving, who was the original LeBron James. He didn't have the passing ability that he did, but everything else was pretty similar, and even at one point people discussed him as the GOAT of the league. 22 is Moses Malone, who helped Dr. J to his 1 NBA title. Moses was dominant though, and as a 3-time MVP doesn't get talked about enough in these discussions. For number 21, I don't think Jerry West does enough either. He was as elite of a guard as they come. The only knock on him though is his 1-8 finals record thanks to Bill Russell. Number 20 might be a little controversial because I have Giannis here. Some people might think it's way too high because he's still a current player, still young, and has a lot left to go, but he's a 2-time MVP, a defensive player of the year, and had he not won last year's championship, he'd be way down the ranking, but since he did, he proved that he deserved this. At 19, we have Kevin Garnett, who's another former MVP and defensive player of the year. His only title was won on a super team, which does affect his ranking, but he more than exceeded as a leader during that run. With the 18th spot, we have Karl Malone, and this may be a little low in some people's minds, but just like Jon Stockton, I took into account just how much John made Malone look a little better than he was. Then for 17, I had to give it to Dwayne Wade, and he did it all. Won a championship by himself, won 2 as a second option, and had a long career on top, making him my pick for the 3rd best shooting guard of all time. Then at 16, I have Dirk Nowitzki. For a while, I had Karl Malone as the 2nd best power forward ever, but recently I've given Dirk that spot. Both men were MVPs, but unlike Malone, he won a title on his own. Number 15 then goes to David Robinson, who I think is one of the most underrated players out there, because he's also one of the most complete centers in league history. He wasn't as flashy or doesn't have some of the big moments that these other guys do, but this long list of achievements should be enough to prove my point. At 14, we have Oscar Robertson, all-time great, ahead of his time, 3rd greatest point guard ever. Then for 13, it goes to Kevin Durant. He may be the best player in the NBA today, but the fact that his only titles came alongside the Warriors does drop him down a little. The 12th greatest of all time, I would say, is Hakeem Olajuwon. The fact that he controlled every aspect of every game he was in, from blocking shots, scoring, mid-range, to getting steals and playing defense, was enough for me to rank him here. He was just a little bit more complete of a center than David Robinson was. With number 11, it goes to Steph Curry. I know it's a little controversial to rank him over Kevin Durant. Some people have a different opinion, but again, he won his title on his own, has more MVPs than Kevin, and oh yeah, revolutionized the entire game of basketball. Number 10 is pretty unanimously Tim Duncan's spot on most people's list. GOAT power forward, no explanation needed. Now number 9 is where things get tricky. It's where I put Larry Bird though, and I've never seen anyone put him this low, but I just have cases for everyone else to be ranked a little higher. He only had a 12-year playing career, career and only averaged 2 threes a game for his career. Don't get me wrong, still an NBA legend though. At 8, I have to go with Shaq. Without a doubt top 10, and it was tough to only put him at 8. But if Shaq was at 8, Kobe had to be at 7, and they're neck and neck in rankings, and Kobe's 5 championships to Shaq's 4 is the main reason that he beats him. For 6, it goes to Wilt Chamberlain. I put him higher than Shaq because both men dominated, and Wilt dominated more in his era. And I ranked number 5 in Bill Russell ahead of both men because of the championships. The Celtics had a flat-out super team in Bill's playing days, so he did have that advantage, but since Russell was the ultimate leader, he still beat them out. Then for the final 4, we have the obvious choices. Magic at 4, Kareem at 3, LeBron at 2, and obviously MJ at 1. Okay, I'm out. Bye.